Hi there, welcome to QA Box Let's Test. This is the same diagram that we saw in the part 1 of the video series. This represents the architecture of Cypress. So we have written a lot of command that gets executed within the browser. So we looked at the DOM commands like cy.get, cy.contains. We looked at the Windows document. We also looked at the action commands like type and click. They all got executed within the browser. Then we also did the cy.request to hit the API endpoint. And behind the scenes, Cypress makes use of Node.js HTTP module to make those web requests. So those requests were not getting executed within the browser, right? They are being executed on the web. And that is the very reason why cy.intercept does not intercept these API requests, which you make using cy.request. Now, in this video, we are going to work on this particular section wherein we are going to execute Cypress command, which can access the resources residing within your operating system. For example, you have different files that are available onto your local computer. Then you have database sitting somewhere on a different machine, right, which you can connect using the network. Now, what are the different things that we can accomplish by hitting these particular resources? So I've been asked, if I can show how can we read data from Excel, right? So we have used cy.fixture to read JSON data, right, and then make our test cases data driven. So now if you can write your data in the Excel file, how are you going to read the data within your test cases? All right, so we're going to see that. Now, the other thing I talked about in some of my videos that when you hit an endpoint, for example, you get the response back, but there is no way for you to confirm that that's a valid data that is being returned by the API. How can you do that? So in manual testing, how do you do it? So you hit the endpoint, you get some response, and then you also query your database. From there also you get the response, and then you compare those two responses. Okay, and then you can ensure that hey, yes, the API is returning the correct response. So in this video, we are going to see how can we accomplish that, and to accomplish it, we have to make use of a Cypress API through which we can execute code in Node.js, and we can accomplish that with the task plugin event. So the command, the API that is available in Cypress to do this means to do the operations onto your local system resources is cy.task. Okay, and this is the signature of this method. So it accepts at minimum one argument, which is the event name, right? Then the second one is when you're passing argument to that event. And the third one is when you're passing some kind of options as well. All right. So the agenda of this video is we are going to first understand cy.task and all the moving parts involved into cy.task. Once we get hold of what cy.task is, then we are going to read data from Excel file. We are going to also read data from RDMMS database, and like I mentioned, we are going to enhance our test cases to now also include the post conditions, like whether the data that is being shown by API is there in the database or not. All right. Before we move on, I would request you to go to my channel, go to the playlist, look out for Node.js basics, and watch out part 8, 9, 10, and 11. These are the prerequisite for this video. So pause the video, go and watch these 4 videos out, because I'm not going to explain these concepts again. It's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be a duplicate effort. But briefly, in part 8, I have shown ways to work with the files residing in your local computer. So you can read file, write file, append file, rename file, and delete file. You can also check for existence of the file. Okay. In part 9, I have shown how you can convert the Excel file into a JSON object and then save that into a JSON file, and vice versa. In part 10, I have shown how you can write both synchronous and asynchronous queries to work with MySQL database. In part 11, I have shown how you can write asynchronous query to work with Microsoft SQL Server database. Now go to Cypress API, go to commands, and look out for tasks. So this is the documentation page, and you could see execute code in Node via the task plugin event. So you have to open the index.js file within Cypress plugins folder, and you have to define your events inside this. This is my API endpoint which I'm going to hit, and it is going to return me these 5 users. And I can also show you these. I open a MySQL database, run this query, select all from users. So I see 5 records in here. All set. Let's open our code editor. This is my Excel file which I'm going to use to read data for our test case. We close this. So this is my Cypress plugin index.js. These are the 3 packages which we require to read data from XLSX file and MySQL. So this first one is going to help us in writing the asynchronous query. Second one is going to write us the synchronous database queries. Now this is our section module.exports, and we have this on task. In here I have to provide in all the tasks that I want to create. Now this far we have created just one task which we created for Percy in our visual testing video. If you have to pass in multiple tasks in here, so you have to pass them in the form of object. So these are the different tasks that I'm going to create. So all I need to do is replace that with that object. Now in ES6 syntax, if the key and value are same, you can just provide in one value in here, but I would like to go ahead with this. So these are the different tasks that we are going to cover, and we are going to start with the first one, which is no param, right? So this is my task, and if I have to use this, I'm going to say cy.task, and I need to pass in the name of the task. You could see in here, this is the only mandatory thing. Then second one is the argument. So we are going to see that as well, and then we have the options. So options, as you could see, timeout and loggable, right? So we have already covered options, so I'm not going to worry about this option part. We are going to cover event and the arguments. So all you have to say is just copy this and you get this, all right? And this particular task is invoking the function that I've defined. This is my function, very simple, straightforward. We're just logging to the console, no params, right? So let us save everything. So this is saved, this is also saved. We have to change this to only. Now when we run this, we are going to first see an error. So let us see that. The error says the task no param returns undefined. You must return a value, null, or a promise that resolves to a value, or null to indicate that the task was handled. This is the thing. So we have to return something from here. So if I just say return null, right, and save it, all right, and execute this again. All right, so now this is successful, and in the console we could see no param, but this particular code where I can see that, so I can see it in my console, right? So this is executed in the node environment, not in the browser. That is the point, and this is something that we take to the next level, all right? And we can use this to read files, read database, and whatnot. Okay, now if I just change it to, let's say, okay, all right, and save it, right, re-execute my code. All right, so now if I click on this, you see it has yielded okay. So now this value is accessible within the browser, all right, right? And in here you see no params. Great. So once I have got access to the value, what I can do is I can simply use then, all right? So this is going to yield me some text, so I call it text, right? And in then you have to write a callback, okay? And in that you just write this line, expect txt to equal okay. Let me save this, and now this assertion should work. Okay, so now you see this has started working. All right, so which means that I create a task, return something, and then use that in my test case. All right, that's what we have to do. Okay, great. uh, Now this particular function does not take in any argument, all right, but we also have to pass an argument. So I'm going to run my second test case. So now you could see which task I'm invoking? I'm invoking single param. The single param is now invoking this function, right? Very simple again. We are just passing in an argument to this function and we are logging the message, okay, and we are returning okay. So yes, we are going to say cy.task and we are going to invoke that, and in here I have to pass in the arguments. All right, so this is how you can pass in, because in cy.task the second argument is argument. All right, like that. So if you have to pass in a single argument, this is how you're going to pass it. So we just say in here, let's say hello world, like that. Let me save this one and save this as well. Let's go back and see our test case. Very nice. So in here you see we executed the single param and the argument that we passed in was hello world. Let's take it to the next level and we have to pass in the multiple parameters now. How can we do that? So when we needed to pass in a single argument, we passed it like this, but when we have to pass in multiple arguments, we have to pass those in the form of object. Okay, so now in here you see this is my task name and this is the function that it is invoking, and my function is this. So we are again logging object.name and object.age, right, to the console, and we are returning okay again. So let's pass in name, okay, like that, and we say John, okay, and let's pass in the age, okay, to 35. All right, so let us save this, change this to only, save it, go back. All right, so now in here you could see the argument was John and this yielded okay, and we ran our assertion. All right, so the next one is to read data from Excel, right? So we require two things. We require the file path and require the sheet name. Okay, so this is my Excel file path and this is my sheet name. So okay, we have to provide in now two arguments, right? So yeah, we know that how to do that, right? So now let us make a change. This test case is currently reading the data from cy.fixture, and we have to replace cy.fixture with task to read data from Excel and convert it into JSON. Okay, so let's start doing that. So we say this becomes a task, and which task? So the name of the task is generate JSON from Excel. So let us provide that, and then I have to pass in multiple things, so which means that I have to pass in an object in here, or and let us pass in these two properties, okay, like that. And again in here we have following the same ES6, because the key and value are same, so I can pass it like this, right? So rest all the things would remain the same. And in here you could see what are we doing in the method. It's very simple. We are making use of this that xlsx module. We are reading file, and in here you just have got argument, just like you had object and then you just said object.name. So in here we are saying okay, I'm going to receive an object from here, and I'm going to say arg.excel path, and same way I'm going to say arg.sheet name in here. All right, so this is the only code that you have to write when you work with this xlsx package, right? And if you go and watch my video, then I'll also explain how can you do the reverse of it. Means you have the JSON and then you want to convert that into Excel, right? So now the thing is, this particular method always return us the array of objects, right? Because we assume that in the Excel we are going to write multiple set of data. So in our case there is only one row, I showed you, right? So I just have to say this, okay, like that. But you can further tweak it. So based on how many rows are returned, you can use the for each, and pretty much like if you have watched my data driven video in this series, I've explained different ways through which you can work with your multiple set of data. You got to do the same. The only thing that I've done in here is I've just changed the cy.fixture from cy.task. All right, so I just save everything, change this to only, and set the previous test case to skip, save it, go back to the runner. All right, great. So you could see that we are able to use the data from Excel file and supply it to our test case. Great. So now let us move to the database section. Okay, so the first one in the list is get DB data sync. Okay, this is the configuration values that we require to connect with the database. This is the query that we have to write, and this is the logic to fetch the result set based on this query. Now in this particular case, I've kept both these values inside the function, but you can parameterize it and it makes sense also, right? And you can pass in two arguments. One is for config, the other one is for query, and then accordingly in the test cases you're going to say cy.task, and you provide in the name of the task, and the second parameter would be your argument, right? So we understand that part, and that's why, just to keep it simple, I've hard coded these values, but you're not going to do it like this. You're going to make it a generic function so that you can run it against different databases, or maybe different tables. So whatever is your preference, right? So when we hit the cy.request, we get the response in response object, all right? And then on that object we have body, and this users is coming from our result set. So let me open this. So this is the users, and which is an array, right? So therefore we have to say response dot body dot users dot length. It has to be equal to, now this particular thing is also going to return us an array, and we are going to check the length of it, all right? And in the async version, all right, so you see what we are doing is, so this is my asynchronous code, all right? So I have just used one more thing in here. I said, okay, return new promise, and this promise always gets an a callback which has got two arguments, resolve and reject. And again, I've covered this promise part in my JavaScript video series, so you can see more about it in there. But just to talk briefly about it, so resolve will tell you, it's a method basically which tells you that, hey, promise is resolved, and then you can use the then method. If the promise is rejected, right, we are going to use this reject method, and when we invoke that promise, and it's rejected, we go for catch, right, block. Right, so this is my asynchronous code, so I put that inside it. Now why I'm using this, because remember, in the initial case when I did not pass in this return uh, in here, right, we got the message meant to basically return either null or some value, right, or a promise which will eventually resolve into either a value or null. Okay, so therefore this is that case when we are covering the promise part. Okay, and then in the test case, it's pretty simple, right? We are doing, we are just invoking in the first case get db data sync. In the second one, we are invoking get db data async. All right, like that. So if I just save it, and let me just execute both of these test cases together, okay, and run these. Okay, so execution is finished. Great. So let us open the console as well, because we'd like to see few things in here. Okay, so this is your response object, and that you have body which has got this user, like I said, and then you have got array of objects. Okay, let us look at this database query one. In here also we have an array, and we have got the same set of data. Okay, asynchronous one, again of course we are going to see the same result, all right, and in the task as well we are going to see the same result. So that ways you can confirm that the response from your API is the actual data that is sitting there in your database. Now this is a simple query. I understand that we are saying select all from users. In the real world application, we have complex SQL queries. So how can you find those queries? Because this particular method is allowing you to just execute the query. So if you have the query, you can consume this method directly. In my videos I've also explained how you can execute the stored procedure. So again, I've said this many times, so please go and watch that out. So if your APIs are invoking the SPs, right, even that part is handled in the video. but let's say there are no SPs and they are executing those heavy queries when we have a lot of joins. So if you have got access to the database, then what you can also do is you have certain tools like SQL profilers. So you just set up, okay, hey, all the queries that are being run on this database, I just want to profile those out. And that ways you can fetch, you hit the API request manually, you see what queries, database queries are being fired. So those queries would be traced in the SQL profiler. Just capture those queries and put those in here. If not, go and ask your developer if they can offer you those queries. Right? Great. So let us look at the documentation one more before we conclude this video. So what all do we have in here? So, okay, one thing they're talking about cy.read file, they say that cy.read file always assumes that the file exists, but what if the file does not exist, right? So, if the file does not exist, cy.read file will break your test execution. Okay, so if you want that your test cases will continue to be executed, you can write your own method, like we have written so many. So you can say cy.task read file. Okay, and now in that you have one of the method. This fs is the native node module to deal with the file system of your computer. So this exists sync checks for whether the file exists or not. If it exists, then it is returning the data of the file, else it returns none. So I've covered all these different methods in my video there in Node.js, how to read file and do different operations on files, right? So again, I mean, you can do the same with directories as well, if the directory exists or not. And database we have already talked about. uh, Promise one is also something we have already covered. So yes, there is not much left in here, so we are pretty good. So I hope you like this video. Thank you so much.